Welcome to Alaska's Native Voice. I'm Antonia Gonzales. Elders, advocates, educators, and tribal leaders are among those committed to making sure Indigenous languages and cultures continue to be priorities in education. Efforts are being made for younger generations through higher learning and beyond. Language and culture are being taught in schools, in community learning groups, summer programs, and at cultural events. Language and culture is always a focus of many statewide gatherings and conferences. Join us as we talk about the importance of language and culture in schools and how communities are embracing programs to keep them alive. Right after the news.
I'm Hannah Bissett with KMBA News. Pat Pitney, the president of University of Alaska, spoke on Friday at AFN. She spoke about changes within the University of Alaska system. Pitney says the university's goal is to enhance Indigenous students' experience.
Our message is simple. UA, with its universities and community campuses, is here to empower Alaska, build our workforce, mold our leaders, partner on opportunities, and spur research.
Pitney also touched on various programs that will try to enhance Indigenous student enrollment. Up next, we had Aaron Leggett, Chief and President of the Native Village of Eklutna, and Gloria O'Neill, President and CEO of the Cook Inlet Tribal Council. They discussed changing the face of education and policy changes so that tribal entities have more of a say of what education goes into their communities. They also introduced their new project titled Our New Ancestors, with a video presentation. The video talked about what could change in our education system to have a more holistic view of education. For example, having elders in classrooms, hands-on experience, and new educational materials that reflect Indigenous values. Aaron Leggett took the podium next to ask an important question.
In the same way that we transformed our healthcare system more than 2 decades ago, imagine what it could look like if we took over our education system and it was culturally relevant and not just educating our Alaska Native people, but all Alaskan students that come through the education so that we can make informed decisions for the future of our state.
The teaching of traditional values and Indigenous ways of life are important to tribal leaders, parents, educators, and students. Concerns have been raised in Southeast Alaska, where a lawsuit was filed by 2 parents over a poster in Ketchikan Charter School, which lists tribal values including reverence of our Creator. The suit claims violations of the First Amendment and Alaska's state constitution regarding spiritual or religious use. AFN attendee Tesla Cooks is from Southeast Alaska.
I would say that our Southeast Alaska traditional values can be shared with anybody. And I don't think that they're specifically only for Native students or those values can only be acted upon and lived in by Native students. I think those values should be shared with everybody, and everybody in our communities should be living by those values. Those values came from generations and generations of our ancestors and what they learned and their wisdom from our land. So I think it's important that we all recognize and live in those values here.
Tribal leaders in Southeast Alaska have said the meaning of reverence of our Creator is different for everyone, and that parents are welcome to have conversations with them, but the lawsuit is the wrong approach. More dance groups than ever are signed up to perform during the 3-day annual gathering. Emily Schwing met up with one group in Bethel during one of their rehearsals.
Panika Gimuk founded the group back in 2019.
When we first started this group, there was 3 drummers and 6 dancers, and look what it came to be.
Yeah, there's like at least 50 people here tonight, maybe more.
Maybe more.
There are almost a dozen drummers now. The group is called Kasikironiut. Andrew Kolanik is in his 60s now. He's been playing the drum and singing since he was young.
When I was a kid, I used to go to practices and always go sit by my uncle. And right next to my uncle is my dad. He just looked at me and smiled, and I just sang with that old man.
In the last few months, practice has become a little more intense as the group prepares for its first ever performance during this year's AFN. It will also be the first time dancing for many of Casa Quiromute's members, including 11-year-old Mildred Temple.
What makes me excited about it is about being on stage and being happy being there and having family here.
Casa Quironute is among nearly 20 groups that will dance, sing, and drum during AFN this year. I'm Emily Schwing.
I'm Hannah Bissett with KMBA News.
The AFN newscast is produced by KMBA and Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, supported with funding by Rasmussen Foundation, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, ExxonMobil Alaska, Chalista Corporation, Maniluk Association, South Central Foundation, ConocoPhillips, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and Donlin Gold. This is a production of KMBA and Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, brought to you through Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
And welcome to Alaska's Native Voice. From the 2022 Alaska Federation of Natives Convention, I'm Antonia Gonzales. On today's show, we're talking about incorporating Alaska Native cultural values and traditions into public schools. And I have some guests here with me today. Gabe Canfield, thank you for joining us. June Pardue and Josie Borden, thank you all for being here. June, let's go ahead and start with you. Please introduce yourself.
My name is June Semyonoff Pardue. I was born in Old Harbor Village on Kodiak Island. My father is the late Jacob James Semyonoff Sr. He was born in Ayaktolik Village, which no longer exists. And my mother, late mother, is Sophia Jane Johnson. She was born in Pikmiktolik Reindeer Camp. That camp doesn't exist anymore, and she grew up in St. Michael in the Norton Sound.
Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate that. And Gabe, please introduce yourself.
Uvla Lotuk. My name is Gabe Canfield. My Anupiaq name is Kungana. I grew up in Ketchikan. My family comes from Wales and Nome. My parents are Leah Weapuk of Wales and Nome, and my father is Perry Canfield of Ketchikan. It's awesome to be here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And Josie, you are joining us on the phone. Please introduce yourself.
Uvla Lotuk. My name is Josie Burdon, born and raised here in Nome. Here, Gabe, we both have a connection in that we have family from Kingigan, Wales, and my father is from Nome. I'm a retired school teacher of 30 years and now focusing on language preservation.
Well, thank you. Yes, we appreciate you getting up early and joining us by phone, too. Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit about, well, congratulations, June, on your award. You're honored by the Alaska Federation of Natives Convention. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was kind of shocked when I got the news, and it was I was given the award as Courageous Woman, and that came from Hannah Solomon, who was an Athabascan woman, and she was an activist and just totally immersed in her culture, supported it, and I'm just really honored.
And share your thoughts on why it's so important for language, culture, tradition, Native values to be incorporated in education.
Let me step back to my childhood. I was raised Sohpiak. That was my father's culture. And when I was a little girl, I traveled up to be with relatives in St. Michael and Imangak. And, I can remember feeling so loved by my Auntie Ruth Johnson and Auntie Pearlie Johnson. And while I was there, a little girl, they made my very first mucklucks and my mittens and my parkie. And traveling back to Kodiak, I grew, a little bit older, and I realized no one down here is making anything. And I couldn't figure out why. No one spoke why they weren't skin sewing or working with seal guts or carving. And when the arts, when we started learning that we had with art in collections overseas, like in France and over in Finland and Russia. It kind of sparked something in me for me to want to create Sohbiak articles. And as a young child, I learned how to weave grass baskets. And then from there, as I got older, the Alaska State Council on the Arts got a hold of me and asked me if I would teach basket weaving. And then that led to me visiting museums in Alaska, and I was always fascinated with what I saw at the Sitka Museum. They were the Sheldon Jackson Museum, and they were always sending for me to be there during summer months to demonstrate my basket weaving or my beading. And while there, I saw all these beautiful fishskin articles, the mukluks and mittens and bags and parkas and parkies and whatnot. And since then, it was always my quest and this yearning in me. We Sohbiak people need to be making our own articles. That needs to come back to life. That was taken away from us during the Russian fur trading days when our Alutiiq people, men, became slaves. Women went through such hardship that they didn't have time to skin sew. And I believe that's how we lost all of our arts.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I'm so glad that you're part of the education and bringing back the arts. And also, Josie, as well, you were honored last year for your work in education. Share a little bit about why you think it's so important for Native values, traditions, and culture to be included.
Over the years, I've been invited to Nome Belts High School, our local campus at Northwest Campus, to teach people who want to teach Inupiaq language, to continue to speak our Inupiaq language. This morning I thought of Isakdui Ilisikdua Ipirang, which translates to teach those who want to learn to speak Inupiaq. Ilisakdui Ilisukdua Inupirang. Our language is so connected to the land. The students at Nome want to embrace it, want to learn it. And we have partnered with Northwest Campus to bring in teachers from the village. We have people from Brevig Mission, Stebbins, UAF people came in from Fairbanks. It's this weekend that we're teaching to promote our languages, whether it's Yukdun, Iraq, St. Lawrence Island, Yupik. We want to foster people who are interested in being language teachers to promote our heritage languages. Nome Public Schools currently has an immersion school focusing on kindergarten, first, second graders. Occasionally, I'm invited to teach at Nome Belts. I did last quarter, and the students are amazing. They soak it up. They learn in one quarter. It just blows your mind. They're wanting to learn how to speak in Inupiaq. From the grassroots level here in Nome, I enjoy any aspect of wanting to teach Inupiaq. Whether it's, my mother has since passed. She died a year and a half ago. New Inupiaq language speaker, and having to write her stories in the Nome Nugget with her rich heritage from life in Wales. But within those stories, we would embed Inupiaq words. And one woman called, and I ended those stories and Nome Nuggets, our local newspaper. She phoned my landline and she goes, Josie, I really miss those stories. Those were the only stories that I could learn how to speak Inupiaq. And then I hear from other people who have received these Nome Nugget stories, like living in Spokane, and they'll mail each other these stories of her life when she lived in Wales.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Josie. It's just amazing to hear both you and June talk about it and reviving language and culture. Gabe, what are your thoughts?
I feel like I have to go back a little bit into my childhood and some of the things that I got to experience whenever I was growing up in Ketchikan. I remember participating in events in school and in events outside of school when I would be going to the Ketchikan Indian community space and into Saxman and Ketchikan. And we would be participating in different dances and making beaded robes and beaded socks and different things. And I remember being 7, 8, 9, 10 years old and not really recognizing the significance of it. Even into high school, I remember we made cedar woven baskets in an art class, and we had an art class dedicated to Native arts. And I didn't realize how significant it was to have those spaces, those dedicated spaces for youth to be able to create art and be able to work with elders and be able to work with community members and learn from our community members their skills that they've had and passed down through generations of their family. And it was so awesome to be able to come into my adult life and recognize how awesome that was and how amazing it is to have those skills and have that chance and ability to say, I made this when I was 6 years old. It's like a tiny little bento box that we wove out of red and yellow cedar, and it's just so cool to be able to share that and remembering that. And I think that Ketchikan High School has really upped their chances to have art courses and language courses. A couple years back, they introduced the Haida language course into the school. So it's just really cool to see it flourish in so many different spots in Ketchikan. And I think it's been doing that all across the state. We have language nests and culture nests popping out of all over the place. We even have adult culture camps coming up, especially in Inupiaq spaces. And it makes me so excited to see all of that grow.
And June, not only do you participate in Elders and Youth every year, but you also are educator back home. Tell us a little bit about how you bring this language, culture, and teaching back home.
Well, with a language, it started a few years back when I formed an Alutiiq dance group in Anchorage, the very first in Anchorage. And we incorporated our native words in with the singing and songs that we did. And when I'm invited to the Knik Tribal Culture School in Wasilla and Palmer, they're in between Wasilla and Palmer, I like to bring our Alutiiq words. Like, for instance, we had one project making sewing bags, and we have a mixed school. They're Alaska Native, and then we do have some people who are not Alaska Native. So bringing the word kakiwik in so that the students learn the Native word with the project that they're making. And it's just so wonderful to be able to walk into a school where we can do that freely, and the support comes from Knik Tribal Council and the community. We're just so blessed to have that, and then when I'm going into the villages, I like to incorporate not just our Alutiiq words, but also our Native values. It's so important to teach the young generation, all of that we, Sochpiak, Soch means people, Piak means real. We're real people. And I like to share with the students that, we have a spiritual world. We're real people. We're the real people walking on this earth, and we believe in a spiritual realm. We have that right. We don't need to be giving that up. And I like to share that with our students, And when I'm mentoring, I'm 71 years old, so when I'm mentoring younger people to follow in my footsteps, I like to share with them that, there are some things that we don't want to bring into our culture. We, we don't want to bring alcohol and drugs into it. That was introduced to us. We didn't have that. And in order for us to heal from past trauma and those kinds of things, we need to be able to have our feelings intact. They don't need to be, subdued. And we just need to live and be good examples for our young people so that they can grow up to be healthy emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and so that they can become productive Athabaskan, Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian people. And that's what I like to share when I'm with the students in schools.
Well, thank you so much for that, June. Those are just, I really appreciate you sharing and being here today. And our producer, Emily Schwing, there's a lot of people who go to both the Elders and Youth Conference and AFN. And our producer, Emily Schwing, got a chance to catch up with some people this week. This is Ben Pian is a King Island descendant from the Norton Sound region, and he's a subsistence hunter and commercial fisherman. And his ancestors are renowned, known for their carving skills, and he's now teaching those skills at school. Let's hear what he has to say.
It's really important to me because, like, when I was younger, subsistence was it was a lifestyle. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't something you did for fun. It was a part of who you are, and having it in our school system is really important because it just kind of reinforces how important it is. These days, say for example, last spring, after doing some ugruk hunting and walrus hunting, I was able to bring pieces of those animals into class and actually let all the students in class take part in cutting them up and putting them in bags, Ziplocs or food saver bags, and preserving them is sort of getting lost slowly. It's not as abundant as it was when I was younger, like the number of boats that are hunting, the number of people that are hunting. And it's a part of who I am, so I want to make sure it gets passed on.
And also you carve.
I do carve, yeah. I carve ivory.
And do you teach carving as well?
I do, yeah. That is a big part of my class is I teach wood carving or bone carving or ivory carving, soapstone. Soapstone is kind of one of the things that you practice early on. It's a really soft material, and it gets their skills kind of honed up before we actually can let them start carving with ivory. And
how do the kids react?
Some of them love it. They'll come in before the bell even rings, and they'll get their project out, and then they'll work until the bell rings again, and then they want to stay longer. And it's really nice to see that taking place.
Who taught you how to carve?
I learned from my dad mostly when I was young, but also when I was in high school, we had a King Island elder who was working in the same job that I am that I'd learned a lot from as well.
King Islanders are known for their carving.
Yeah, they've always had a big part in ivory carving. I mean, the walrus migration passes right by there, so they've always subsisted off of walrus and then carved the ivory that they were able to collect as well.
And Josie, Ben, what did you think about what he had to say? One of the things that stuck out to me was that just how the students want to stay longer and keep learning. They don't want to go home. Josie, go ahead.
I would add the same sentiment that he mentioned. I would bring in ducks to school so they could iridak, which is to pluck them. And it was amazing how many students did not experience how to iridak. Their reactions were amazing, almost kind of afraid to pull the feather. But once they watch you and you offer them to iridak, to pull, you're experiencing them to a whole new life that we know. How to iritak a mallard, how to iritak the lirlik. So watching that through their eyes and providing that only enhances what they're not experiencing maybe at home. So bringing that is very important. We have local people in Nome, Tom and BJ, when they harvest beluga, will come into school, show them how to prepare the beluga for pickling. And it was, I was watching AFN Youth and Elders and watching the segment where they're cooking or pickling the salmon. So I know students get very engaged when they're actually involved in doing those things.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Josie. And June, your thoughts too. Do you have students who just want to stay and they don't want to go home?
Oh, yes, absolutely. No matter where I'm at. Oh, my goodness, I can't get over being over in Cordova where we ordered some bear guts from Kodiak, from Fish and Wildlife down there, and they sent those over. And once the people got started on scraping the guts to clean them for making a coat, no one wanted to leave. Everyone stayed on that dock, and we worked from like 8 in the morning till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And we were so fortunate to have good weather. You know, Cordova can rain. And people didn't want to leave. And then when we moved from there to cutting it and making a garment into a building, the community came and no one wanted to leave. People were bringing food so that no one could step out to go out to eat. Everything was just excited. Everything was just exciting. And it's not just only in communities like that. Man, they made a beautiful bear gut parky, and I was just honored by Chugachmute for the invitation to lead the group with that. And it's just not in, a nice big project like that, reviving an art that was lost for a couple of hundred of years. When I'm in schools in the Mat-Su region or at Knik Tribe, the students don't want to leave. It's like you hear them, "Aw," when they tell me we've got to clean up and put things away, and they're all moaning and groaning because they don't want to leave. They don't want to put their work away. They're excited. They're hungry to be together like that, to tell stories and to share with one another. We encourage them to talk too, so that everything is just beautiful.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it just, we're just over here smiling and giggling because it's just, it makes you feel good. It makes your spirit feel good. And I think that's part of it too. We have to take a short break and we have just a couple minutes we have some guests here and we also have a guest on the phone. And Josie, thank you so much. You're listening to Alaska's Native Voice, and we're talking about tradition, value, culture, and the importance of education. Welcome to Alaska's Native Voice. I'm Antonia Gonzales, and we are at the Dena'ina Center in Anchorage, where the Alaska Federation of Natives annual convention is going on. And we're talking about some great stuff today. It's such a great way to end AFN, to talk about the importance of language, culture, and tradition. I have June here with me, and Gabe, thank you for being here. And I also have another guest. Let's bring in Samuel. Hi, Samuel.
Hi, how's it going? It's really great to be on with you, Antonia.
Well, please introduce yourself.
Of course, my name is Samuel Hrotsika. My folks are Tom and Vanessa Hrotsika. I'm Alaska Native American Indian, Yupik, Unungun, Winmum, Wintu, and Navajo. On the Alaska Native side, my dad's side, the family's from outside of Dillingham and Ekuk Village, so got to represent Bristol Bay.
Well, thank you for joining us, and you've been sitting here listening to our conversation this morning, and just what are your thoughts? Why is this so important to include all of this in education?
The biggest thing that connected with me was how when our relatives are educating us, when we're learning from them, when we're learning from our elders, there's a different type of connection that's formed. And it's deeper than something that, a math worksheet or a take-home reading. It's deeper than a word problem. It connects with you more solidly to your core as to who you are as a person, who and how you operate within this broader world as a real person. And what really stuck out to me then in connecting it with my own life was an experience I had when I was attending Baggage Middle School here in town. I was born and raised in Anchorage. With the Rose Urban Rural Exchange, being able to go out to Chivac. And we were able to go out there for a week, my fellow students and I, and it was a different type of education. We were able to make masks and participate in dancing and singing. And that was just something that I hadn't experienced before. And it was so grounding in a way that just was completely foreign to me, but grounding in the best way. So I feel like every other student who participates in June's classes, who has that honor and has the honor to participate in other classes taught by other elders and other folks within our community, it really is such a blessing because it connects so differently.
And June, also looking at students from when they're born, right? And it's great to see at Elders and Youth Conference just the youngest kids taking part. And why is that so important to start when the very youngest age?
It's so important because it establishes identity, and more than that, it brings. Well, let me share an example. We have a great granddaughter who comes over to our house, and when she was, just not even a year old, she was pointing at the drum that we have hanging on our wall. We painted petroglyphs on it, Kodiak petroglyphs, and she would listen to, every now and then Native music that we had going on, and pretty soon she's saying boom boom before she said mama. She wanted to pound on that drum. So we took that down, and we're just so blessed to be able to see a great-grandchild wanting to dance and to use the drum, knowing that that's part of her. She when they're little like that, they know that's part of them. And then I have other great-grandchildren who come over to visit, and we're introducing them. Well, one of them, when he was teething, Papa Charlie, my husband, Papa Charlie got out the smoked salmon and used that for teething. And then pretty soon, the taste buds got in there. And whenever he saw Papa at the table working with smoked salmon and he's sitting in his playpen, boy, he'd just start pounding on that playpen and shaking it and making real loud noises because he wanted that smoked salmon, and getting them started when they're young like that. It just, there's bonding that takes place between grandparents and parents and babies, and they grow up in it, and it just become, I grew up like that, and we become Sohpiak. We're Sohpiak, we're Inupiaq, we're Yupik, and it just becomes part of our identity.
And I also just love seeing, with all the dancing, and we were talking about your grandchildren, just the youngest children out there, some that are not even walking yet, bouncing their heads. But producer Emily Schwing got a chance to talk to Mildred Temple, who's 11 and part of a dance group from Bethel that's performing here this week at AFN for the very first time. and let's hear what she has to say.
Tell me what your name is and how old you are.
My name is Mildred Temple, and I am 11 years old.
You're 11. And how long have you been dancing?
This is probably like my first year.
I noticed you're dancing, and you guys are like really good. Like, you know all the moves on every drum beat, and I was wondering how you learned it.
I learned from watching, and at first I was too shy to dance, and then I just started dancing because my dad said if I didn't dance, I wouldn't be able to go AFN or to any events we have.
Have you ever danced to AFN before?
No, this will be my first time.
What makes you excited about it?
What makes me excited about it is about being on stage and being happy being there and having family here.
That was a young dancer just getting involved and just listening to that. And we can hear there's some dancers that start off, kick off the mornings here at AFN, and that's what the sound is behind us. But Gabe, your reaction to Mildred. Oh, I'm sorry, Samuel.
Oh, yeah, no, I think that's so heartwarming. It's incredibly heartwarming. Talk about that intergenerational connectivity. I just hope that next year she and her family are able to come out to Elders and Youth, too. We had some really great dancers come up and perform with that, and it was just a wonderful experience.
And Samuel, share why Elders and Youth Conference is so important.
Again, it's just that development of who you are, who and how. I met family when I was at Elders and Youth that I didn't even know I had. I was able to connect with folks across my region and across the state. You know, June and we served on the conference council a couple of years ago, which was just such an honor and a blessing to have those experiences where you're able to connect with people, develop yourself, but also feel more ingratiated with the broader Alaska Native community. I mean, that's just such it's almost like a warm hug year after year to connect with people all across the state, know that they have you, they've got your back. Of course, there's a great responsibility that you then carry with you, especially as a youth moving forward, knowing that all of your elders are there, they're backing you, they're really supporting you, but they trust you to actually do something and be productive with what you learn. And so it's that passing on of the responsibility, too, that's also so important. So I encourage everybody, every elder and youth to come to the conference.
And I have to ask both of you, just your reaction to being back in person. You know, the both conferences, the Elders and Youth Conference and the AFN convention were virtual because of COVID-19. And so even our show was virtual. So we're finally all back together. And June, what was that like to be back in person?
Oh, to be back in person was just absolutely fabulous. Oh my goodness. You can't give hugs over the air like you can when you're in person. And it was wonderful to meet up with people and to, you look and you smile and you have that connection with your eyes. And our body language, there's more to language than just speaking. When we're together in person, there's a lot more that is shared. I really enjoyed the Elder and Youth Conference, because the whole purpose of the Elder and Youth, the elders, mentoring the youth and shaping leaders is what it's all about. And we see young people like you growing into leadership, and we're very honored, that we took part of that. And it really means a lot to the elders when we see that happening. We see the fruits.
And Samuel, what was it like to be back in person?
I think June stole my point, actually, on both counts. The hugs, you can't get a hug in a virtual space. There's so many folks on Zoom, they get Zoom fatigue, which is completely understandable, but it takes away from that experience, that passing along and that warm hug. It doesn't exist, that I just talked about. And as well, so much of, at least my communication and my family's communication, it's nonverbal. It's with eyes. There's so much of that communication that happens, that warmth that's shared, or the judgment that's passed, the jokes that are shared, all the teasing that occurs, that happens through that nonverbal communication. And so, You can't have that at all during Zoom. Things get, especially with technical difficulties, you might have people stumbling over one another. If anybody's tried to sing happy birthday to a family member while on Zoom over the past few years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So to actually be in person for elders and youth, to see everybody from all around the state, all in the same room, knowing that we're dedicated to developing those leaders, but also learning from people who can be mentors all across the state. It was a really great experience.
And what about funding? Because there is a need to bring funding and have funding for programs for education. So June, how does that work? Like where is the funding coming from to help?
Well, the funding for me to be here came from Old Harbor Native Corporation, and I'm so grateful to them. They took care of, for me to be here. I'm not, familiar with the whole this building and all the logistics with that part of it. I can just share that Old Harbor Native Corporation took care of my travel, and they took care of, they gave me some per diem money and took care of the hotel. They offer transportation for the elders to make it to AFN, the Elders and Youth Conference, and to all our other functions. And that's just so fantastic, because then there's bonding that takes place with other elders from the Old Harbor Native Corporation, from our Old Harbor Village, people who are descendants from there. And then I'm here as as an elder rep. And then we have new elder reps who came in from Washington State, who were born in our village but live down there. And then bringing them in so that they can reach their youth, our youth, who live outside of Alaska. And I'm just so grateful to Old Harbor Native Corporation for them pitching in and making sure that we're here.
Thank you for sharing that. And Samuel, when you look at education, in public school, but also in higher education, there are definitely funding needs.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think that, as I was just sharing earlier with my personal experiences, right? It's not to discredit any of the folks at ASD or what they were producing, the opportunities that they have plenty. But it's just a different type of learning, I feel like. And so it is wonderful to hear that many of our different other Alaska Native organizations are putting forward funding to try and maybe fill in that gap that may exist right now. But I think that greater funding in the public sphere might be necessary.
And June, when you are teaching your classes, I wanted to talk a little bit more about because you do so many things, and so to share a little bit about your fish skin and the tanning and all of that, and how that is, being revitalized.
Oh, it was about 20 years ago I got interested, after visiting the museums and seeing all these fish skin articles, I got interested in wanting to learn to tan salmon skins. And man, I was asking Sobiak elders, and nobody knew how to do it. And so I was just stumbling. I didn't know what I was doing. It sure was an attraction while I was doing that at the Alaska Native Heritage Center, and tourists would just, boom, come over. And there I am with my stiff, ugly, wrinkled up old skins, And I was blessed when this one man came out of the cafeteria, and he goes, ma'am, and he was Southern guy from Mississippi, and he goes, I see her, and he's such a gentleman. Waited till the end of the day, and he says, I'm just so blessed to see you doing this. It brought back memories of me and my grandpappy when we tanned snake skins. Can I share our recipe with you? I see you're struggling, and I'd like to help you. And I tell you, I jumped on that. But you know what? Fish is not a reptile, so the solution didn't work. Years later, just a few years later, my husband and I were invited to Chalkeetzik Village by his great uncle, the Reverend Chief David Salmon. And while we were in Chalkeetzik visiting with him, my husband asked me, well, what about salmon skins? Did anybody here tan them? And he looked at Charlie and he goes, the women did that. We fished, the women did that. They did it back there. And back there was where the willows were. And he said they used willows, and it's because of him we were able to come up with a solution that works really well. During the pandemic, I offered classes, Zoom classes, and had over 100 classes with communities in Alaska, and offered for tribes to hey, when you can pay for a student space, I want their whole family there. I want the whole family there, and it flourished. So today we have people tanning salmon skins in the villages using birch bark and willow bark. They can use alders. We can use tea. And next week we'll be sewing with salmon skins with University of Alaska students, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's through the Native Studies program.
That just sounds so amazing, and it is really interesting to hear a story how someone from, somewhere else wanted to help. That's great. But let's go to another clip. We have Emily Schwing spoke with January O'Connor, and she's the founding director of Ravens Group, an organization that writes grants and consults with schools to increase Alaska Native values and culture in schools. Let's hear what she had to say.
Did you grow up in Alaska?
I did. I was born and raised in Cake, Alaska, in Southeast. So I'm Tlingit and with roots in the Kachani and the Kiksadi clan.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I wonder when you were going to school.
Yeah.
How much of this was in your education experience?
It was not necessarily my education experience, but it was like part of my community education experience growing up. And I think, as modernization has happened, some of that has shifted a little bit, and it is more important to bring those that cultural aspect into the schools now. Just because kids spend so much time in the school system, it is very helpful.
We're always seeing music or art programs or things that are a little bit more culturally tied. They're first on the chopping block. With what you do at Ravens Group, if it's a way to sort of combat those cuts.
Our priorities are to work with rural and Alaska Native people, and particularly to advance rural and Alaska Native youth issues. So in our opinion, it's the best practice to ground everything for Alaska Native youth in Alaska Native traditions, values, and language and culture, because we've seen the best results with that. That's just what we do. I don't know if we move the needle in any way whatsoever, but the people we end up working with tend to seem happier, and the kids who participate in the programs that we support seem happier, and from what we've seen, it works, so we just keep doing it.
Is it just about Alaska Native youth? I mean, how does this benefit people who don't have tribal affiliation?
There are a lot of people who are searching for meaning and their own identity, and I think that the activities we do are grounded in reflection and respect and reciprocity, and that resonates with everybody.
And Samuel, just what are your thoughts on what January had to say?
I think it's so important for everybody to have as great an opportunity as they can to connect with their culture. Again, this one thing that's incredibly meaningful to the development of a person and to a well-rounded person. So it's great to hear all of the work that she's been doing, and I hope that it reaches more and more people as time goes on.
And June?
I believe what Samuel said. Yeah, it's so important, and we don't exclude anyone either with any of our activities during the Elder and Youth Conference and AFN.
And something that Emily had brought up in that clip is about the, non-natives, and because of colonization and our cultures as Native people, trying to be stripped away with us, there is, serious issues today. There is actually a lawsuit in Southeast Alaska where some parents sued the school district because they had a poster up that had traditional tribal values. And so we've been talking to people, and tribal leaders in Southeast Alaska have stood up and said, this is our culture and our values. So let's hear what January had to say about that.
When I look at a lot of best practices for youth, so many of the best practices that are supported by research around social emotional learning and respect and reciprocity, those are inherent traditional Alaska Native values, and they are applicable and cross-applicable to everybody and beneficial to everybody. I think the problem comes when either it's being conveyed or heard as a must or a you need to be this way. That's always a challenge. That's a communication issue, not necessarily a values issue.
And also our intern, our producer that we worked with this week, Hannah, also went around and talked to people about this lawsuit and why Alaska Native values are so important.
Tesla Cox. I would say that our Southeast Alaska traditional values can be shared with anybody, and I don't think that they're specifically only for Native students or those values can only be acted upon and lived in by Native students. I think those values should be shared with everybody, and everybody in our communities should be living by those values. Those values came from generations and generations of our ancestors and what they learned and their wisdom from our land. So I think it's important that we all recognize and live in those values here.
And June, I'll start with you. Just your thoughts.
My thoughts about values is that it's so important to raise our children in those values. And when I'm in a school setting, it's important for me to share our values with all students, with all teachers, because without values, who is human? We need to have values, and it shapes us, and we want that shaping to begin when our students are young. You want to respect your elders, you respect yourself. We respect the water, we respect the air, and that's what we breathe. We breathe the air, we drink the water. Our food comes from the water, our food comes from the land, and it's so important to teach youth that. Our spirituality, it always has been there. It's been there since time immemorial. For when we were created, we were created with values. We have stories that share values, and I don't think any of our values should be taken away from us.
Samuel?
Well, I think it's important to stress as well, as was mentioned within the clip, how indiscriminate those values are. And June touched on that as well. They're applicable to all, because it's incredibly important for everybody to know who you are, to know who and how you operate, to know where you come from, to know what you uphold. And those are seen through universally, indiscriminately, through a lot of, if not all, of our Native values. So it's incredibly important to hold those close to you, no matter where you are.
And June, what are your hopes as AFN wraps up, and what are your hopes for the younger generations and looking at everything that you do? What do you hope for?
Well, I just hope for success with our youth. I hope that they will grow to be whole, that continued healing if they need it. And I worry about their education and how they're going to get it. Where will funding come for them in the future? I worry that for their health, we want to make sure that our health system is working for our youth and as they grow older and into their elder years.
And same thing, Gabe, or Samuel, I'm sorry.
No worries. I think it's similar in that success, but it's also, again, that call to action for all of us, especially on the youth side, to say, all right, here's all of the amazing things that we've been given. Here are all the blessings that you've received. And I've received plenty, especially from my family. But to do something with them, you have big shoes to fill. And that really is a call to come to these places, to learn as much as you can, to take as much back to your respective community and do the best with what you got. And that doesn't matter if you're a janitor, it doesn't matter if you're a politician, it doesn't matter who you are, but to be the best that you can be within yourself for your community. It's something that I love seeing here at AFN and at Elders and Youth, and it's something I hope we continue to see more and more of in the future.
And also just being a leader, a young leader. Both you and Gabe were conference. You had a special job this year. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, serving as conference guides together, we were really able to, we were endowed with the responsibility, I should say, from Log and I and the folks at FAI to help guide folks through the conference, to introduce speakers, to give reflections on things that they said, and to meet them off stage as well, to help keep the timing of everything succinct and going, and really react to certain things that would pop up every now and again. So it was a great learning experience for sure. We definitely felt more comfortable as the conference went on about speaking with everybody.
And what is a conference guide for people who don't know what that is?
Conference guides are the folks that can go up on stage before darn near every speaker and give a brief overview of who they are and of what they do, and for folks who don't know all across the state. And even online, too, we had over 62,000 folks tune in over the course of the conference, which was great. But afterwards as well, give them gifts and really show our appreciation for everything that they bring to the table, and then move in transition into the next thing. So as a part of that, we kind of join on temporarily as staff almost. It's such an intensive experience, and yeah.
And I think it is important because even, having you come on the radio, I've mentored a lot of students in journalism before, and I do have that belief where you just have to throw them in the fire. So I remember one time I had an intern and I gave her a handheld microphone and I said, go talk to this person over here. So she walked and then she turned around and came back and I said, no, you got to do it. So June, your thoughts?
I just want to thank Sam and Gabe. Thank you so much for, stepping up and taking on those positions. Really appreciate it. And you did a very good job. Both of you did. I think it's important. We got to shove them out there, because if we don't, they won't be there. Wouldn't have been on stage if they weren't shoved out there. It's important. That's what Elder and Youth Conference is all about, is shaping leaders. Mm-hmm.
And it helps them in the future, because I'm sure the skills that you, Samuel and Gabe, used and learned, you're going to use in the future.
And that was one of the things that Log and I said at the very end. She's like, now you can go up and speak in front of any room. You can command any presence because you've done this. And I didn't realize that the point of that didn't sink in until afterwards. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is something this is a skill that I can now take, and a friendship that I've now made that I can carry throughout the rest of my life. That's an incredible honor. It's an incredible honor. So thank you, June, for that congratulations. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're coming to the end of our program. I just want to thank everyone, all our guests today. And June, just your final thought as we wrap up today's show.
Well, my final thoughts are this was a blessing to be able to gather with everyone from all over the state, and not just the state, for people who live in the lower 48 and guests who came. What a blessing it was to be able to get together, to be able to meet like this, and business was taken care of. I'm just happy about it. Very, very happy.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of our guests this whole week. Thank you to Emily Schwing, also all the technical people that we work with, and all our listeners. And happy AFN 2020. I'm your host, Antonia Gonzales, and hopefully we'll be in person again next year. Thank you for joining us.
AFN, Alaska's Native Voice. Produced and directed by Antonia Gonzales and Emily Schwing. Broadcast support provided by Rasmussen Foundation, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, ExxonMobil Alaska, Chalista Corporation, Manilik Association, South Central Foundation, ConocoPhillips, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and Donlin Gold. This is a production of KMBA and Kowarnik Broadcast Corporation, brought to you through Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.